What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Monday, everybody. Okay, so I was waiting for this conversation between Shawn Ryan and Dr. Diane Hennacy. You guys know she's been on the show once. She's the doctor that Kai Dickens from the Telepathy tapes started following around and working with her with these autistic, non-speaking children and people. And I know that there's a lot of controversy about what the telepathy tapes are seemingly uncovering. There's a lot of criticism against what both Kai Dickens and Dr. Hennessy discuss that happens with these autistic savants, because that's what they're technically, autistic, non speaking savants. And some of them speak a little bit, but they all seem to have a more heightened ESP than speaking people who are not necessarily autistic, but there are many also autistic individuals who speak, who also, in my experience, because I'm married to one, seem to have. And they generally have similar traits. They have deep understanding of life in general. They try to help other people in general, which is consistent with what today Dr. Hennessy spoke with Shawn Ryan about. And it was a really momentous conversation too, because of everything that's happening right now. And there is this underlying message that keeps being communicated about these kids and what their purpose is according to them. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months, because the Telepathy tapes documentary is going to come out next month, and there is an experiment there between Kai Dickens and Dr. Julia Mossbridge, where they went through a really profound experience, apparently. And in the interview Ross Coulthart did with both of them, you can see that they're like really excited about whatever happened there with that experiment. And I think that Dr. Hennessy here is also deep in this. She's been in it for decades now. And the evidence that she's found over the many years, the many tests that she conducted, made her like a unique first person observer into all of this. She's the one that's been looking at this for the longest time in the world. So I do want to make a few disclaimers here, because one of the topics that they talked about, because Shawn Ryan has a lot of friends that are into psychedelics, and there is a growing trend of psychedelics helping people who suffer PTSD, who have social issues or some type of other mental illness, and the use of psychedelics has helped them. There's also people who are like fighting a life-ending disease, and in the final years they turn to psychedelics, and they do also report that there is a massive improvement in their the way they experience life despite the situation. That is happening, has been happening for a while, but there's also this stigma about psychedelics, because back in the 60s everything was banned, and psychedelics were like considered equally dangerous than other substances that are really, really dangerous. And this stigma has persisted for many, many decades. And there's currently a movement that is trying to fight against this stigma, which I think is probably the best possible idea, because we need to learn how to separate the ones that are like plants and specifically psychedelics from all the other different substances that really do destroy lives and really do destroy families. That is true. So the disclaimer here is that I am not condoning in any way substance abuse of any kind. So at a certain point in the conversation, Shawn Ryan asked specifically about psychedelics, and Dr. Hennessy did mention that there is a correlation between these autistic savants and some of the experiences that happen during a psychedelic trip for humans. And if you guys know the channel, the very first topic that I started talking about was that, because I went through a decade long experiential kind of phase with psychedelics. There was also obviously, and this is something that I'm not ashamed of talking about because I went through a near death experience and it happened with a certain substance. It wasn't a psychedelic, it was another substance because I did have problems. But after that, I had the near death experience and my life went through a completely different road. And I managed to recover, and I'm proud of that. That happened back in 2014. So after I went through that, and then when I was already sober and thinking more about the whole experience that I had, I realized that there were a number of experiences that I went through that other people were also going through within the psychedelic world, because it is like a culture, it's psychedelic culture. And there are many different types of experiences that happen that people report that they had, and I've told this in the channel a couple of times. What I experienced specifically is that we um tripped, two friends and I, and there was a certain moment where we could listen to each other's voice inside our heads and we were not moving our mouths. I don't know if I can call that telepathy. I think it's because we don't know exactly what that is and what causes it and all that. It's really hard to like label it, but that's what happened. And since that happened, I've been trying to investigate what potentially could have happened. And now listening to Dr. Hennessy here talking about the correlation, because I've asked people about this a bunch of times, people who have experience as well, and people who have experience, for example, meditating, for example, these altered states of consciousness, I think that can happen both with meditation and with psychedelics. And apparently, these children also have a similar connection or experience similar things like out of body experiences and what they call telepathy, although it's different there. And with the remote viewing program in the 70s, there are also many of these skills that the remote viewers had that these children seem to have. So I think it's a matter of trying to understand that there is a phenomenon going on, and there has been for a while, and we're just trying to understand it. But the stigma is still there, and negation of this happening to families who have autistic children in their household. I think it's one of the problems too, because and just to give you an example, more localized here, as soon as I put out my interviews with Kai Dickens and Dr. Hennessy, which are separate, my mother is a medical doctor, and we have a bunch of friends that are doctors, and some of them have nonverbal autistic children. And when they saw the interviews and then they listened to the telepathy tapes, some of them reached out and we had long conversations about it. So just so you know, what Dr. Hennessy calls clusters, there seems to be also a cluster here in Mexico. And for me, it was really important, this question from Shawn Ryan, because I think that the stigma against psychedelics is also very strong still. And conversations like this one, I think, help lift those stigmatized opinions about topics like this. So I'm going to play you a little clip of Shawn Ryan asking about the correlation of psychedelics with these children or autistic savants. And this is the response from Dr. Hennessy. Shout out to Shawn Ryan for this really wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Do they have other communication with God?
Oh, I forgot. This was the other disclaimer, because you guys know how I am very inquisitive about religion and the dangers that it has based on the history of religion, organized religion. So these concepts and some of these concepts that are handled here come from people who believe in God or have a faith in some type of religion. And I just want to say that's their interpretation. There is a phenomenon happening that I think those of us who are like agnostic, for example, or even atheists, will also see that there is some kind of phenomenon happening here. We have different interpretations of what describe here. Shawn Ryan is describing talking to God. Dr. Hennacy is about to talk about these children reporting, speaking to angels. So that's an interpretation. But in books like, for example, Jack Vallet's Passport to Magonia or John Keel's Operation Trojan Horse, there is this discussion about this phenomenon presenting itself to people over millennia and being interpreted in different ways. So I just want to clarify that because I do not endorse any type of religion. I respect people's faiths. I think that's what we should all do, because until we get real answers that are like more easily explained through logic and objectivity and all that, I don't think any of us can make assertions like that, like there's definitely a God. I mean, there are many signs that are really weird, communications, stuff like that. I've spoken here how there are a couple of times when I feel like I cheated death in some way, or something happened that made me move to a different way or to a different location, and then something happened right there. There are things like that that are unexplainable that happen to everybody, but in my interpretation, that does not mean that whatever is happening, it means that God is real. Even though I've had some really wild experiences specifically linked to that, I just want to understand what we're dealing with. And if people they do have their own interpretation of this, that's cool. I respect it and I support whatever you want to believe. But let's understand too, and this is like a major philosophical struggle right now with everything that's going on in the world. We need to understand that everybody experiences reality in a different way, and there will eventually, I guess, if we're still here, meaning the human race, there will eventually be a moment where we might find out what the hell's going on. But until then, we need to try and keep all the cards on the table, all the possibilities. So yeah, sorry for the long-winded sort of disclaimer, but I do want to be extremely clear and respectful when I talk about this, because some of the things mentioned here I think are just interpretations, and we can interpret them differently according to how we view reality. So that's that.
With Jesus, with
Yeah.
source, whatever they're
Yeah, they talk about they talk about being in communication with Jesus. They talk about being in communication with angels.
what kind of communications?
Two-way conversations.
Two-way conversations? Any specific examples that stick out in your head that you want to bring up?
It's really mainly a message of how we need to be more loving. It really is about that. It really
That's not a bad message, I think. I mean, it's a good message, I think. And whatever interpretation you want to give it, just take it as what she's telling you. It's the world would do much better with more love and more compassion in it. That's just the reality.
it pains these autistic individuals that there's so much disharmony in the world. It really does.
It pains me too. Is this free conversation, or is this, for example, psychedelics? I have a lot of friends that use psychedelics. It's for brain injury, for PTS, for all that stuff. Talk to a lot of really big, successful businessmen and women as well. And a handful of them are very interested in partake in psychedelics. And a commonality that I hear, a term that I hear used often is like a download. I got a download to an answer of something that I'm looking for, whether that be personal life, business life, it could be anything. Is that what the conversations are like? Are they like a download, or can they tap in at any moment in time and ask a question?
I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, but definitely they describe having downloads. Absolutely. And there are a lot of parallels between the experiences people report when they take psychedelics and the experiences that these autistic individuals report that, yeah, I mean, they're not taking psychedelics. But it's as though their system itself is already running, that circuitry that psychedelics activate. And
meditation too. And ancient medicine, they had many different protocols to follow to get into those states. Yeah, that is true.
They report being out of their body a lot of the time. Something we call dissociation. And that's something that, remote viewers, some of them do astral projection. They say that they leave the embodied perspective and, their consciousness, becomes disembodied. Well, these kids describe themselves as, sort of being out of their body a lot of the time and, very just tenuously tethered to it. Another thing that they report is synesthesia, which is like the kaleidoscope colors that you can.
That is so wild to me because specifically with psychedelics, there's this feeling that you can smell a color or, it's really, or hear a taste. I don't know. It's really wild. And that kaleidoscope thing it's prevalent in psychedelics, and there are different types of kaleidoscopes. I can tell you because I know I've seen them. So that correlation is really interesting that these kids can see and feel that as well. It's pretty wild, in my opinion.
Experience with various visuals, symbols or, sounds or whatever, So that's something you see with psychedelics. And telepathy is something that people on psychedelics have also reported.
I've heard that.
Yep. And I spoke to Dr. Hennacy about this and also to Kai. And yep, that's what I think happened. And this is what I experienced. I told you already, specifically.
I've heard this as well.
Yeah. And this concept of the hill, which is talked about in the telepathy tapes, where you have all of these non-speaking autistic individuals who say that they meet at a regular basis at the hill. And, the hill is not really a physical place. It's a place, it's a realm that you have various mystics talk about. And I've heard people on psychedelics describe that it's like they go someplace where it's like there are all these other beings there, the other individuals there, from wherever, all over.
That's dimethyltryptamine, I think. But I've heard other different types of plants and substances that can have this effect on people.
That you just all come to, some kind of non-physical convergence somewhere. So it's
so there's that, which I think is wonderful. And then there's the time travel aspect or time displacement, could be, that these kids seem to have an access to or have some type of ability. And it's wonderful listening to Dr. Hennacy talking about this more detailed, because there's always this attempt at trying to investigate what these ESP abilities are for people who have reported them for many, many, many centuries. And they've been stigmatized as the woo and all that, right? But what is this, and how can we find a potentially more scientific explanation to it? And people like Dr. Hennacy, people like Dr. Jacobo Greenberg, Dr. Dean Radin, Dr. Julia Mosbridge, all of those people who have made that attempt have always been ostracized and judged. And I mean, they don't really care because they know what they're trying to uncover and study. And now it kind of feels like there's finally going to be like a path that we can follow so we can find a potential explanation for some of these things. And listen to this exchange, which talks about the time travel aspect of, and I know it sounds science fiction-y, it's not exactly that, but there is a potential explanation for how that happens. So here's Shawn Ryan's question, and then listen to this answer.
How do they experience time travel?
Oh, a lot of these individuals are very precognitive. They'll have experiences of something that hasn't happened yet. And
you know what this makes me think about? If you guys have been following Matthew Pines, and I'm half joking here, but because I know Matthew, and he has been writing tweets for a while, for years now, where he has been like analyzing the whole situation. There's like a convergence, like the situation that we talk about on the night shift, Doomer Friday nights, about how this convergence seems to be happening at some point between AI. Matthew Pines mentions Bitcoin and the UFO topic and politics in general, and there seems to be like this road to a convergence. And I think about Matthew Pines when Dr. Hennessy mentions this, because there are many tweets he's made that have been becoming true in many ways, and there some of them are really cryptic, but it is really strange how Pines, I think it's just an analytical kind of perspective that he has, and it just happens to be how he does it, right? But it reminded me of him. If you guys haven't seen it, go to Matthew Pines's X account, and you'll see a lot of times he like retweets stuff from years ago of something that just happened, or that as he kind of predicted, which is kind of funny, right? But I just wanted to say that. Sorry.
like one of the best examples is this young woman named Elsa, who was in the Telepathy tapes, and she had this vision that her father was slipped on ice and broke his hip and ended up in the hospital. Well, at the time they were living in Arizona, and that didn't look like that was a very likely possibility. But then what happened is, within 3 to 4 weeks, he was on a business trip and he slipped on ice and broke his hip and ended up in the hospital.
Wow.
So she had that experience before it already happened. And something that Phyllis Atwater, who I mentioned earlier, who's the expert on near-death experiences, but one of the things that she's written about is something called future memory. And future memory is, she's had experiences of this herself, and people can have these experiences on nitrous oxide. Laughing gas can sometimes bring about this, where you literally go to some point in the future, experience something, and then come back into, this time period. And, and you're only gone for, seconds, at most, in terms of, and so you're aware of the fact that something's happened, because she describes it as there's like this, like scintillating, lights, there's like all these visual things she sees first before things shift. And then she finds herself somewhere in the future in her life. And then that closes up, and then she's back in this time period. When that future event comes around, it's not just deja vu. It's not just that individual going, oh, this seems familiar. It's literally, oh, I'm here now. Okay. And exactly what people are going to say, who's going to walk through the door, everything. And so it's like you saw a preview of that section of the movie reel in advance, and now you're there. And it's something that she has many, many, many examples of this. And so that's I'd say the predominant type of time travel that these kids do is really more into the future rather than into the past.
Have you seen this actually happen personally and throughout your studies? Have you seen any incidents?
This that she's gonna tell right now is wild as hell, just so you know.
Well, I've just heard anecdotes, but one of the things that I want to do is I want to test them for precognition. I've seen people email me with a prediction and then email me later with, okay, that prediction. See, I told you, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems about precognitions, though, is that usually for people who do this kind of time travel, I mean, time is time is a strange concept to them. And precognition doesn't really give you, it's not like there's a calendar date that comes along with it so that you know exactly when it's going to happen. So you don't, so when Elsa had that, vision of her father, I mean, she didn't know if it was going to happen, in 2 weeks and 2 years. You just don't know.
Lot to digest there, but I just wanted to show you the type of conversation that just happened between Shawn Ryan and Dr. Hennacy. I just want to share with you guys a tweet from Chris Ramsey that made me think of him when I saw this conversation. He says, "Friendly reminder that pursuing truth around UFOs is a collective effort. Although techniques, beliefs, and opinions may differ, we're on the same side. Whether it's pursued through governmental disclosure, science, experiencer and witness testimony, psychedelics, or contact through meditative states, the varying modalities only prove how similar we all are fundamentally." And yeah, I completely agree with Chris here. And we need to keep like an open slew of possibilities because there's a lot happening. I just keep going to Terrence. you know the clip.
It's only going to get weirder. The level of contradiction is going to rise excruciatingly, even beyond the excruciating present levels of contradiction. So I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. And at that point, novelty theory can come out of the woods, because eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's just too nuts. It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. I look for the invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, possible human immortality, and at the same time, appalling acts of brutality, genocide, race baiting, homophobia, famine, starvation, because the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed. The collapse of the socialist world, the rise of the internet, these are changes so immense, nobody could imagine them ever happening. And now that they have happened, nobody even bothers to mention what a big deal it is. The mushroom said to me once, it said, this is what it's like when a species prepares to depart for the stars. You don't depart for the stars under calm and orderly conditions. It's a fire in a madhouse. And that's what we have, the fire in the madhouse at the end of time. This is what it's like when a species prepares to move on to the next dimension. The entire destiny of all life on the planet is tied up in this. We are not acting for ourselves or from ourselves. We happen to be the point species on a transformation that will affect every living organism on this planet at its conclusion.
Let me know what you guys think about this one. I thought it was a really interesting exchange between them. I'll leave a link, obviously, in the description for the 3.5+ hour interview. But yeah, let me know what you think about what the connection that Dr. Hennacy made between psychedelics and the abilities that these autistic savants display, and what she mentioned in precognition and time travel. What do you think about that? What do you think about this stigma that still remains about both psychedelics and seemingly ESP, or some call it psychic phenomena. I don't know. I know that there are trigger words and woo words, stigmatized words. But what do you think is going on there? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's just our imagination? Let me know in the comments. I'm very eager to know what you guys have to say about this one. This was a little bit longer, a little bit more winded. I know I interrupt a little bit when the videos are there, but I like doing that because it's just, the thoughts just come to me instantly and I gotta relay them. That's the style. I'm sorry. But yeah, let me know what you think. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That's all you need to do in order to help us, and it is what helps us the most, so thank you. But if you want to support us in other ways, there's a few links down there you can choose from. You can become a member on YouTube, or you can support us through KGRA. Anything you choose to do is always appreciated, so thank you. That's it for me today on this video, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious and inquisitive like Dr. Diane Hennacy. Always. Bye.